She said my guests didn't belong here, so I bought the entire row of cabins next to hers. Now the only one who doesn't belong here is her. Yeah, that's how it ended, but trust me, it didn't start that way. My name's Daniel. I'm in my mid-50s, and I've worked my whole life running a small construction and renovation company. I've built homes, fixed docks, restored cabins for others. And when I finally had enough saved, I decided to build a little piece of my own, a lakeside cabin. Nothing fancy, just a cozy, blue-trim place by Maple Lake, surrounded by tall pines with loons calling across the water. For me, that cabin was supposed to be my quiet reward after decades of hard work. Then I met Karen. She owned the cabin right next to mine. Same size, same style, but she treated hers like a royal estate. The first time I saw her, she walked over while I was unloading tools from my truck. Shoulder-length blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, clipboard clutched like a weapon. She had that tone that made you feel like you were already in trouble. You'll need to file a form if you're planning to make any structural changes to that cabin, she said. The HOA is very strict about modifications. I smiled. Just fixing a few loose boards. Nothing major. She narrowed her eyes. I'll be keeping an eye out. And that's when I should have known keeping an eye out was her polite way of saying, I'm going to make your life hell. For the first few months, things were okay. I'd spend weekends fishing, grilling sometimes, having a few buddies over. It felt peaceful again. But peace doesn't last long when there's a Karen around. One Saturday evening, a few of my old Army friends came by. We sat by the fire pit laughing, swapping stories from back in the day. We weren't being loud, just a bunch of older guys reminiscing. Then she appeared out of the shadows wearing a robe and holding her phone like she was filming an episode of Neighborhood Watch the Power Trip edition. "Excuse me," she snapped. "Who are these people?" I blinked. "They're my friends. They don't look like they belong here," she said, scanning them up and down. "This is a private community, not a campground." I actually thought she was joking. "Karen, they're my guests." "The HOA has rules," she fired back. "Only registered occupants and approved visitors are allowed overnight stays." That was pure fiction. I'd read the HOA handbook front to back. It said nothing of the sort. But she didn't care about facts. She cared about control. The next morning I woke up to a bright yellow envelope taped to my door. Notice of violation, unauthorized guests. Potential security risk. Security risk. For a couple of retired servicemen. I called the HOA office, and sure enough the complaint had come from her. They told me she'd been sending concerned neighbor emails about me for weeks. That's when I realized she wasn't just nosy. She was the self-appointed sheriff of the lake. From that point on, every weekend felt like surveillance duty. She'd walk her dog past my cabin every hour, pretending to check the mailbox that just happened to be right by my driveway. Once she even leaned over my fence and said, "You really should trim those hedges. They're technically over the property line." I measured them later. They weren't. I started to understand this woman wasn't protecting the neighborhood. She was protecting her ego. But the moment everything truly changed came a few months later when my niece and her husband came up for a visit. They brought their 2 kids, sweet little ones, 5 and 7. They played near the lake, skipping rocks, chasing dragonflies. Just kids being kids. Karen stormed out of her cabin phone, recording voice shrill. "I told you before, your guests need to be registered with the HOA. I'm reporting this." "Karen," I said, trying to keep calm, "they're children." She crossed her arms. "This isn't a public playground. Maybe they belong somewhere else." That was the line. The moment she stopped being annoying and became cruel. I stood there jaw tight, watching her march back to her porch like she'd just done the neighborhood a favor. That night I sat by the fire alone. The lake was calm moonlight rippling across the water, and I just felt done. Defeated. I'd bought this cabin to escape stress, not to live under surveillance. I actually thought about selling it. Maybe Karen had won. Maybe this place wasn't meant for someone like me after all. But then something shifted. I remembered who I was. I'd built cabins, handled contractors, dealt with inspectors, even negotiated with people worse than her. I knew real estate, and I knew patience. And as I sat there staring at the row of cabins stretching down the shore, I realized something. 3 of them were still for sale. They'd been sitting there for months, maybe years, because of the HOA's stupid restrictions and, well, Karen's reputation. So I made a few calls. An old realtor friend confirmed it. 3 cabins, all unsold, priced lower than I expected. Within weeks, I made offers quietly through my company. No one even knew it was me. Paperwork, inspections, signatures, and just like that, I owned them. I didn't plan revenge out of spite. I planned it out of principle. 2 months later, construction trucks pulled into the drive beside Karen's cabin, my company's trucks with my logo printed on the doors. I was there when she came running out, hair-flying, clipboard in hand. "What's going on here?" she shouted. "You can't just start construction." I turned to her, calm as ever. "You're absolutely right," I said. "These are private properties." She blinked. "Private properties?" "Who's mine?" I said. "All 3 of them." Her mouth fell open. "Yours?" "Yep. I'm renovating them into short-term lake rentals. All fully HOA compliant." For once, she had nothing to say. Just silence, and the look of someone realizing they'd just lost the one thing they loved most, control. From that day, the tone around the neighborhood changed. The HOA board, once quick to find me, suddenly started calling me Mr. Daniel. Meetings became polite. Emails respectful. Funny how owning half the street makes people remember the rules can bend a little. Karen, though, she couldn't handle it. The sounds of saws and hammers drove her insane. She'd come by every few hours demanding to see permits or asking about noise levels. We had every approval, every inspection, every code followed to the letter. She couldn't find a single thing to weaponize. At one HOA meeting, she tried to complain. "His renovations are ruining the aesthetic harmony of our community." The HOA president smiled and said, "Actually, Daniel's upgrades are increasing property values." I wish I'd taken a picture of her face. A few months later, the cabins were finished. New paint, modern docks, cozy decks. Beautiful. The rentals filled up instantly. Families, couples, veterans, all kinds of people came to enjoy the lake. They respected the place, cleaned up after themselves, waved politely to neighbors. And every weekend, Karen had to watch them unload their bags, laughing, grilling, living life. She couldn't do a thing about it. One afternoon, she came to my door again. Her face was flushed red. "Daniel, this is out of control. There are strangers here every weekend. I can't live like this." I looked her in the eye and said, "Karen, you once told me my guests didn't belong here, so I made sure they do now, permanently." She stared at me, speechless, trembling with rage. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quiet confidence of ownership said it all. After that, she stopped talking to me entirely. She avoided eye contact, pulled her blinds down when people arrived, sulked on her porch while new families barbecued nearby. The sound of laughter must have been torture. Then one summer afternoon, I noticed a for sale sign in her yard. A few weeks later, the cabin sold to a young couple, friendly folks who loved the lake, no interest in HOA drama. The day they moved in, they came over with lemonade and said, "Hey, you're the guy who owns those beautiful cabins, right? We've heard you've done wonders here." I smiled and said, "Welcome to the neighborhood. You definitely belong here." And just like that, peace returned to the lake. Not because I shouted louder, not because I fought dirtier, but because I used my head. You see, sometimes the best revenge isn't noise, it's quiet ownership. And nothing silences entitlement like realizing the person you tried to chase away now owns the place.